All right, happy Wednesday, everybody. Today I am going to show you a couple more examples on combining like terms and simplifying expressions. Just giving you another option or another way to do these, maybe without using the algebra tiles. All right, so we're going to start off with just that simplifying expressions piece. Okay, so strategies that I like to use. So when I'm simplifying my expressions, I like to make sure that I underline all of the common terms. Okay, so I have, in this one, I've got 3n minus 5n, and then plus a negative 2n. So this minus 5n, all right, that's the same thing as saying plus a negative 5n. Okay, so it's the same thing. So I've got a negative 5n and a negative 2n, and that gives me a negative 7n. And then plus the 3n gives me a negative 4n. Okay, so combining these three together gives me a negative 4n. Okay, now, same thing, same strategy. I'm going to look for another piece or other variables or other terms that are like, well, I've got 2v, and if I look across the rest of my screen, I don't have any of those. So I'm just going to transfer that one down because that one doesn't change. Okay, so that one just comes straight down. And then the last one I've got there is this negative 10. Okay, and again, there's no other constant terms, so I'm just going to transfer that one straight down. Sign follows, so negative 10. All right, now, expressions are simplified when there are no more like terms to combine. So in this one, I've got one n term, one v term, and one constant term. So that one is done. All right, oh boy. Let's look at this one here for a second. I'm going to change this so that it's bigger and in one line. Okay, so in the next one, again, start by looking at which terms are like. So we'll start with the b squareds. So I've got two b squared terms. I have a negative 10 and a positive. Remember, this is a 1. If there's no number in front of it, it's a 1. So a negative 10 and a positive 1 get me a negative 9b squared. Okay, now I'm going to move on to my b terms. So I've got this 7b and I've got 6b here. Notice how I also circled the sign, that's with them. Okay. So that 7 plus 6 gives me 13b. All right, now last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at I'm going to put 2 underlines here on the constant terms just to differentiate between them. So I have a negative 5 and minus a negative 8. So remember, minus a negative, that makes this a positive. So I'm going to change this to a positive 8 right here. Minus a negative makes a positive. So I've got a positive 8 and a negative 5, right? And that gives me a plus 3. Okay, now if I look again, I don't have any like terms. Remember, b squared and b are not like terms. These are different. The b squared term and the b term, those are different. So this is a combined or a simplified expression. All right. Now, before moving on to any of the other slides or the rest of this video, you will need to complete this last example, all right, and pick the correct choice on the right side of your screen. All right, so you've picked that choice. We're moving on now. So simplifying expressions with the distributive property. Now, this isn't something that we have formally talked about yet, but you've seen it in some of your problems. So I wanted to make sure that we went over it. Now, it looks a lot different when we do the distributive property on paper than when we use the algebra tiles. So you're going to see it done multiple ways throughout the rest of this course and throughout the rest of this chapter. But just know that on paper, this is what the distributive property looks like. So distributive. Distributive means that I am going to distribute the number in front of the parentheses into my expression. And what I want to do, or into my parentheses, and what I want to do is I want to draw those arrows, because then I know that I make sure it's a visual way to make sure that we are distributing to everything within the parentheses. Okay, so I'm going to just drop down this 1. We'll deal with that one in a second. Now, I'm going to take a positive 10 times a negative a. Okay, so a positive 10 times a negative a gives me a negative 10a. Now I'm going to take that positive 10 and I'm going to multiply it times a negative 2. So positive 10 times a negative 2 gives me a negative 20. All right, now we're not done. Once we've done that distributive property, now we need to combine any like terms that we have. We'll notice we've got a 1 and a negative 20. That gives us a negative 19. And then that 10a is kind of all by itself there, so a negative 10a. So here's our answer. So again, using the distributive property, we multiply everything in the parentheses times whatever's on the outside. All right, so next example, same thing. I'm going to take this negative 10. Notice I'm also underlining that sign, and I'm going to distribute it into the parentheses. Okay? Once you draw your arrows, drop down anything that's not by the parentheses. So that 6 needs to be dropped down. Okay, so now I've got negative 10 times a negative 6s gives me a positive 60s. And a negative 10 times a negative 2 gives me a positive 20. Okay, now I'm going to combine my like terms. I've got a 6 and I've got a 20 here. Okay, so I'm going to put it over here so that way I have room. I get 60s. Maybe. Try that again. 60s plus 26. Okay, now in this next one, we're going to use that distributive property twice. So I'm going to take my 9 and multiply it times a and times 1. So I get 9a plus 9. Then I'm going to take that negative 7 times a and times 8. So negative 7 times a gives me a negative 7a. And a negative 7 times 8 gives me a negative 56. Okay, now we combine our like terms. We've got 9a and a negative 7. So 9 and a negative 7 give me 2a. Okay, then we've got 9 here and a negative 56 gives me a negative 47. All right, now to move on to the next slide to get to your instructions for the rest of the hour, you need to complete the problem below and select the correct answer on the side of your screen. All right, once you've done that, your video will continue to play for the next slide. All right, last thing is just kind of our instructions for the rest of the hour. So now that you've completed the video and the examples, you're going to work through the Simplifying Expressions worksheet assignment in Google Classroom. Okay, use the chat button that's down on the left-hand corner of your screen, or Google Meets if you have any questions. All right. Otherwise, you guys are free to work on the Simplifying Expressions worksheet. If you have questions, please ask.